Hey guys, welcome back to Bisrat Apologetics. So the word Bisrat, as you know, is an Ethiopian word that means good news. It's an uniquely African word that means good news or gospel. And the word apologetics is basically a word that is used in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. And it says you must always be prepared to give a reason to anyone who asks you for the hope that you have. And so what we call Bisrat apologetics is really an explanation to people why we choose to believe in the Bisrat, in the gospel. This explanation is given in African terms. It's an African explanation. It's given by Africans to other Africans as well. And so this is why I have Dr. Manono with me here today. And he's going to be giving us an explanation as to why he has hope in the gospel. And so, yeah, we welcome you here, Dr. Malibongwe Manono, and he is based in the University of Cape Town, and his focus is in chemical engineering. That's where he's sort of lecturing and so on. So we're excited to hear about his journey. And I think this is another way that we can demonstrate to people the truthfulness of the kingdom of God, the truthfulness of the gospel, because we know that the kingdom of God is not just the church, it's bigger than the church. And so when we speak to people like Dr. Malibongo, we really see how the gospel or the kingdom is actually invading or penetrating into the world. And so, yeah, we welcome you, sir. Won't you please just share a little bit about who you are and what you're currently doing at the moment?
Thank you very much, Lwandiso, for welcoming me in this space, and greetings to the viewers as well. Yeah, so I'm Malibongwe Manono. I was born in Khayelitsha. Spent quite a bit of my early years there. I did my sort of first and second grade in one of the schools within Khayelitsha Side B environment, and thereafter I moved on to live with my grandmother in the Eastern Cape, in Willowvale to be specific. And it was there that I basically went on from grade 3 until grade 9, and moved back to Cape Town to my parents, with my mother and my father. So they here for better opportunities in terms of academics, and I accidentally got into a physical sciences and mathematics class because my first options had been full at the time. And yeah, this was basically at the Joe Slovo Comprehensive School, which is a technical school. So it's almost like it was bound that having come from such an environment, it became natural for one to follow an engineering career. And so my parents were quite men and women of faith, if you like, in one of the churches here in Cape Town, which really preached very much around the ministry of healing and deliverance. And so Christ has always been at the...
Which church is this? Sorry, if you don't mind me asking.
So that's the Gospel Church of Power.
Oh, okay, sure, yeah.
Which was founded and led by the late Bishop Dapula. So going to church was like a regular thing, from Monday through to Sunday. So after school, it was church from say 7 o'clock until 9. And that really, I mean, we went a well-off family, but I think the basics in terms of the gospel, in having the hope that though we don't have everything that the world may afford or accord somebody, but we had the faith, which was basically everything. And I do remember that at the time, one of my favorite scriptures, I think it's in the book of Ephesians, talking to putting on the whole armor of the faith. And that really was one of the things that kept me as a young person. And I thank God for that kind of upbringing. So, I mean, it didn't deter, or it basically encouraged me to stay focused and having the hope and the faith that God is God who has the ability to turn things around. I remember I used to listen to Jimmy Swaggart back in those days, and used to sing one of songs that I thought was interesting. God said He would turn it around, and those were some of my themes or theme and signature songs in my early years as a young person. I got fortunate to be put into a Saturday schools program, which we attended from the Stellenbosch University's Engineering and the Built Environment faculty, where we had a very serious focus on mathematics and physical sciences higher grade. I was one of the only 7 students in my school to be doing physical sciences and mathematics on higher grade. Having only started to get into that late in grade 11, I remember it was in September 2004 when I was doing my grade 11, and only started doing mathematics and physics in higher grade in September of my grade 11 year, and emerged as the top performer at the school on those 2 subjects. So I came into UCT. I joined the student Christian fellowship here. I mean, UCT undergraduate years were not very easy, but to have a body of believers, we were but young students in our early 20s, and we had these Friday sessions, and I think that again, in a way, kept me grounded in terms of believing that I am here at UCT for my undergraduate studies. I had bursaries. Thank God that those happened. And I was struggling just like any other person who comes from a township school, possibly not well prepared for the university space, particularly for the first year. But I mean, through those meetings, it just instilled hope and faith that I would not get out of UCT without my degree. There were days and moments where we failed courses, and some of my friends would come through, and we prayed about our academics in those years, and God saw us through. And after I actually had a bursary from an oil and gas refining company, so I was due to go and work for them at the end of my 4-year engineering degree. But at that point, it was during the 2008-2009 economic recession, which then led to the company releasing us from the bursary obligatory contract of serving a year for year. And here I was, have not applied for any graduate development program with any company because I knew that I had a set job. It was at that point that I spoke to friends who had already started their masters. And I remember someone saying, I think God speaks in many ways and through networks and people that we are associated and affiliated with. And somebody said to me, if my parents have survived on the question of why, as a Black person who possibly has to give back to their home environment and be a contributor to the so-called Black tax, if you'll allow me to use that term.
Yeah.
After 4 years, why not just go straight and get a job, contribute? We're not coming from a rich family and all of that. And somebody said to me, who really is someone that I looked up to. He was from Lesotho, and this guy was somebody that I prayed with. And he said, if my parents survived leaving without me contributing anything financially to the family for the past 20 years, we would have been 21 years of age at the time. If they survived the 4 years and the many other years prior to coming to UCT without me bringing anything to the table, surely they can survive waiting for 2 more years of my chemistry studies. And I took that, and I think that was a motivator for me to enroll for my master's, which, and by the grace of God, I completed my 2-year master's in 1 year. And again, that was very much driven by the fact that I need to go back and uh, be of value to my family. Both my mother and my dad were self-employed. So we didn't really have a good financial standing, but what we had was Jesus.
So can I just stop you there, because I think you're touching on an interesting subject. So why is it important, for you to go back and give back to your family and so on? Because I think a lot of people, they see the whole black tax thing as a negative thing, almost like it's holding you back. But what I'm hearing from you is that, you still saw it as a positive thing. And maybe we'd just love for you to touch a little bit on why it's important for you to give back to your family somehow.
Yeah, sure. So I think as a black child who comes from environments such as mine, growing up in Kailija with both parents unemployed, for me it's about acknowledging that the fact that your parents have invested in you. You also have younger siblings, and I think it's about understanding your own family environment and position, and therefore, if you like, having the ability to put yourself on the line for the sake of your parents and or even your siblings. And I think that that's something that goes beyond just our families, but if we talk about Christ himself is an example of a man, if you like, who
Giving,
puts himself on the line for the sake of their friends.
Absolutely.
And so that's and I think that the gospel is about family values, more than the gathering. If I think about, we're just the other day we're chatting about and making some interesting jokes about people who were preaching on the basis of the leaving of the saints and apostles in the book of Acts, where people gave everything that they had for the sake of the gospel. They sold their lands and came back, and we're talking about Ananias and his wife, and the incident that transpired there for breaking those values.
Yeah.
This is a community of believers who are who are communing on everything, whether it's financial or it's material things. They are willing to just share. And I think that gift of sharing is something that is quite strongly impressed in the scriptures.
Thank you. I think you've given a very good answer.
So going back to the masters, I then completed those masters in 1 year, and I got a job at one of the big global steel manufacturers. I worked in Saldanha Bay for that entity for about 2.5 years, and by this time I was writing up my thesis. So 1 year into the MSc, I was literally putting together my discussion chapter. All my other chapters were done and approved by my supervisors. I graduated in June 2012 for that MC. And thereafter, I went on to the company's headquarters in Vanderbijl Park, and I think it was there where I was like, I'm on the verge of, hitting the ceiling of a chemical engineering academy, if you like. In that, I have the masters as an entry requirement for a PhD. And I think since leaving, I've been approaching people and asking whether I could get I could do my PhD part-time, and they wouldn't, because I think PhDs aren't necessarily that easy when you are in a non-academic environment. When I was at the headquarters of the entity I worked for in Vanderbijl Park, I really was wanting to do a PhD. I had been accepted at Stellenbosch University for a full-time bursary. I was willing to leave my job. Then, I'm this person who kind of like a breadwinner in the family. So I thought, okay, it would be difficult for me to go for a full-time PhD study where I would only receive a bursary as opposed to having a salary. At the time, I was applying for jobs in research councils such as your CSIR and MinTech, which are very much close to my area of research. And I wasn't successful in those endeavors. And I saw 2 positions being advertised at the Vaal University of Technology in Gauteng, VUT, in short. And I applied, and got interviewed, and I remember asking the head of department whether employing me as a lecturer, they would allow me to do my PhD. And my then HOD at the BUT said, during the interview process, I will force you to do a PhD. So yes. So I'm asking because I really was moving into academia for the PhD more than joy of teaching and the joy of doing research. It was really for me about getting the PhD, but hitting two birds with one stone. That is, I get to do the PhD, but get paid a salary as a lecturer. So I won't have to fulfill
You
my
can look after your
responsibility.
family as well, and so on.
Sure. Yeah. So I did that, and I had fun. I think that, in fact, quite a number of students that I taught at, and even then I was quite an active alumni of the student Christian organization. I was involved in the Preachers Forum, um, and it was an interesting point in my life. I think as a believer, I had so many things that were going south. So much so that for me, the question of God and faith was a big one. I had read the scriptures. I could breathe the King James version of the Bible.
Thou shalt art not.
Um, and and having come from that position to then, whether you are, a brother or a sister in the faith, to convince me that God is indeed God, and he's the God that we still sort of say he's God who's able, he's an able God, he is a faithful God. Those things were theoretical concepts to some extent at the time, based on challenges that I faced, which I thought were unreasonable. And I thought, if God is like existing and stuff, why are these things happening? It took one or two of my students who understood where I come from. It's like, no, man, I'm in a visit. I said this in the SCO, because no one could read me any scriptures at the time to convince me that I must go back to the faith, because I knew those scriptures. If, for example, you talk about, how do you convince somebody who's going through difficulty, whether it be financial or otherwise, who understands that God has said, blessed be the Lord who daily loads us with benefits through the mouth of David. You're like, no, but at this moment in my life, I'm not being loaded with benefits.
I don't see it.
I don't see that. I don't see a cup running over. I don't see a God who is present, because all I'm saying is misery. So to then, and those scriptures are in your head, and you know them. And so anybody who comes to you and tells you about them and reminds you of them, you're like, never that. Because it's not happening in the present moment. But I appreciate those moments of, trying. Someone speaks about the trying of your faith. And if you think about, refineries and how gold is put through interesting temperatures so that we can get the precious metals that we do enjoy in our day-to-day living. And somebody spoke some interesting facts, and I went back to the church, and at the time, I'm literally about a year into the university. There was many interesting changes that I brought into that department and its in its undergraduate program, and I can say without
sorry, I need to just stop you a little bit, just shortly. So how long was this period that maybe I can term as a bit of a crisis of faith, where you were questioning and so on? Because I think it's very important, because all of us go through it. It's just that we don't talk about it a lot. But
so I would say between October 2013 and June, between October 2013 and up until September 2014. So it's almost a year of being at a place where you are questioning a lot of things concerning the faith, the word of God, and its veracity. And through a student of mine, I went back to the church, and I really was just using him in his invitation to say, okay, let me go and attend. And and it became a sort of like a revival of some sort in terms of going back to basics. And sometimes I get caught up in being all deep and acrobatic about stuff.
Yeah, philosophical and so on. Yeah.
Yes. And at the time my father was ill. But I mean one thing that's interesting, I've always came back to Cape Town for Passover conferences.
Mm.
And that for me is somewhat of a truth around the fact that, you know, if you grow someone like the scriptures say, grow train a child
Train a
in
child.
I'm putting this in my, in my, I'm paraphrasing in my own words, so that he may not depart from that way. So that's almost something that gets installed. And I mean I have no disregard for people who weren't born necessarily into families or environments where, you know, parents were believers. But I think there's something about coming from those environments where you can look back and think about the many moments where you've seen the hand of the Lord in your life, in your family, where you think about the many people who've experienced the similar challenges as you, but they've not been able to rise above them. And there, in those moments, you realize that it could only be that God was at work to push you a little bit higher than your circumstances and your current challenges. So at VUT, made interesting changes in the undergraduate program there. I had students who had been failing courses more than 3 times, and I offered my services even on weekends for free. And a lot of them would say, man, you were literally sent for this purpose. And I knew that it was God who had called me to come to that place. I was at a place where I would say I stood in my calling without fear. And I knew very well that this is what I'm called for. It became more pleasant for me to see a student who struggled, passing a course, graduating them. And I've always compared this to the fact that I was in a big manufacturing company. We made steel products from iron ore, which is a rock. And by processing this and putting it through chemical engineering processes would make raw materials for your electric appliances that use steel products. But I never looked at a truck dispatching a rolled coil and got proud of myself that I'm part of the impact around that product. But whenever I saw a student, a graduate, whom I knew had a very difficult time and challenging time within the program, but yet we helped them, pushed them through to a point of graduation, that for me was always a moment to celebrate and get happy. So that and those were part of the things that I thought made me realize that this is for me. So around about that time, 2 years at VUT, there were positions coming up at UCT. Somebody approached me and said, well, we will be advertising, we'd like you, we hear that you are now in academia. We have positions that are opened. Would encourage you to apply. And I made an application, interviewed, although reluctantly, because I was happy at VUT. I'm like, I'm going back to UCT. Spoke about an environment where the space is dominantly white. VUT was generally like a kind of like a more diverse and a more African and Black institution compared to UCT. And I'd understood some politics at the time as of being a student at UCT. I'm like, I don't imagine myself teaching in that very same space. To be a small entity within big fish in our department. And I applied nonetheless. I went through interviews. I received a job offer at UCT. I remember it was on a Thursday. That's the Thursday pre-Easter Friday 2016. And I was traveling back home on that very same day, and I arrived on Easter Friday 2016. I think it was the 25th of March. And when I arrived, my dad had been admitted at the Khayelitsha Hospital, KDH. He had been suffering with stroke for about 3, if not 2 years. But I meet on the 19th. I get my job offer on the 24th, or if my dates are correct. Easter Thursday and Easter Friday, I'm in Cape Town, and I go and visit my dad. I'm come home for the basic. I visit him in the hospital, and he is sleeping. Didn't even get a chance to tell him that, well, I've got it off at UCT and I'm trying to think through it, whether to accept or not. It's a 3-year contract. I'll be leaving a permanent role at VT, but the 3-year contract could benefit me in that in those years, I'll also push my PhD part-time because the resource that I need for the PhD at UCT. So I got there, my dad was sleeping and went back home. Easter Friday, we are all in the spirit of the passing. And we get the news of his passing. I've not had a chance to tell him that, okay, there's this thing that I just got at UCT. And I'm the only person of my family, if I talk about siblings and stuff, who is outside the province. Everyone's in Cape Town. And I made the decision to accept the offer on one of the grounds was, okay, I'll get to do my PhD part-time at UCT. All the resources that I need for the lab are in the institution. That will help in terms of advancing and accelerating my progress through the PhD. But also, we've just lost an important family member, who is my dad. And my mother and my siblings are here in Cape Town. Maybe it's a good time to take the offer and relocate back to Cape Town. I mean, we're still in those emotions of having lost a key and an important member in the family. I sailed through the PhD. I don't. I mean, people go through anxieties. And in fact, if I were to show you what somebody wrote on my board here, just the other day on Friday, a colleague came in. So I'm also the director of postgraduate studies in my department. So that means I'm in charge of all our masters and all our PhD programs in the department. Sure. I convene those programs. And I'd written, MSCs, 180 credits. These are the number of students that we have for the year, and PhD 360 credits. And the colleague came in and wrote in brackets death next to PhD.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, a PhD is not death, but it's a very challenging and difficult program to go through, especially when you're even working full time and doing it part time. But I've never seen. I mean, I don't say this on journalists or UCT written papers where someone asks you, how did you get through the PhD? The real answer to the question is, I don't know, but perhaps the real answer is God. The real answer is I've had colleagues who started their PhDs long before I started mine. Just as I was completing my master's in 2012, who had been in their PhDs on a part-time basis and have yet to submit their thesis. And I came in, I'm a full-time lecturer. I've got this 9 to 5, but an academic job is a 24/7. But this academic job, I have a PhD that I'm doing on the side. And my family will tell you, we were talking about this with my sister yesterday. I think they were not even trusting the fact that I am near submission. It was, I thank God that I never had anxieties of doing a PhD part-time whilst working on a full-time job, which is very demanding. And just God pulled me like no one's business. I got overwhelmed at the end, based on looking back and thinking, did I actually just do that? And the honest truth is, the hand of the Lord just held me through and through. And I got a PhD that was supposed to take 5 to 8 years, at least for a part-time student, done in 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that it was by divine orchestration. And just as I completed my PhD, the 3-year contract would come to an end after submitting, and there was a senior lecturer position that was opened. Many of us applied. Wow. And I got through.
Wow.
And so that's how I became, so then in July 2019, I became a senior lecturer, having gone through a rigorous process, and having just passed my PhD and graduated. So it's really been a journey of trust in God. And sometimes, yes, given the spaces that we are in, we silently and quietly have confidence in the fact that we are not alone, but we are working with somebody who literally cares about all aspects of our lives.
Thank you so much. I think you.
That was the first question that I was trying to answer.
You know what? I just think you've sort of told your story in such a beautiful and clear way that we see the different stages that you were in, as a child growing up, going to church, laying the foundation for you. And I think that we can see how that foundation has sort of sustained you, right through, and we see the hand of the Lord. And I think this is important, because I think we are living in a time where people are actually, I think I see it a lot with people who are professionals, that we are in a stage of questioning things. And there's this, is Christianity true? And this is, primarily why we have channels like this. We want to sort of come from an academic point of view, because like people like yourself are almost unknown. They're hiding in the university there, lecturing and so on. But I think it's nice when people can actually hear, man, this is how he started off. He wasn't born, a PhD graduate and so on. And I think it not only motivates people, but it also, if somebody maybe could identify themselves, with any stage in your life, that there's hope, to trust in God. He has a plan. I also like the part where you talked about, the fact that you were excited when you could see students, developing and getting better. And so, walking in your purpose and your calling, and you don't see the full picture at the beginning, but, the closer you get to it, you can see it all unfolding. And so, yeah, I think actually, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of that input.